The Arch-crusade. Tome 1, The Arcspawn, by K.M. Hogenson. Copyright 2023 by K.M. Hogenson. All rights reserved. Part 1, Pilgrimage. Part 1 is dedicated to Mom for being my first reader. Prologue, Watercress. 2 kings, their guards, and a legion of healing mages gathered in the limestone castle for the fulfillment of an oracle's prophecy. The closest mages attended to a pregnant woman who lay strewn across a labor bed in the center of the castle's largest chamber. To count, this was nearing the 400th birth the assemblage had administered since arriving to the kingdom of Vetron. With each passing delivery, the High King's patience waned, and every mage present sensed it. Each procedure drained the energy of all the mages collectively. Every one of the masters, garbed in their colorful robes, contributed some portion of their magic to ensure a live birth. No one dared fathom the implications of a stillbirth. One among the healing mages, an apprentice named Watercress, did not possess the credentials to attend, but his teacher, Master Annis, insisted on his audience. Had Watercress not resided in Vetron's capital city of Sithica, and had he not been on favorable terms with many of the other masters, they perhaps would have disputed his presence. As it stood, he was permitted in the castle's inner chamber. The apprentice was optimistic about this delivery. Something about it seemed right, although he had had the same premonition about the previous bursts too. As per his master's instruction, Watercress kept to the outer edge of the airy chamber. Most likely, he would not see any part of the delivery, but he was enthusiastic about having set foot inside the glistening castle, which he had marveled from afar during his time studying under Master Annis. He admired the architecture of a domed roof and the historical art of the frieze-works carved into the stone, lining the walls like tapestries. Amid Watercress's appreciation, the baby proclaimed its existence with piercing cries, sending the other mages into a frenzy. The crowd surged toward the labor bed, constellating around the newborn to steal a glance of them. Watercress registered the wails of the mother seeking out her child, but rejoicing cheers eclipsed her voice. High King Panite silenced the room. His towering form loomed over the heads of the mages, and as he scrutinized the infant that the high healing mage presented before him, he demanded,
"Is this it, then?"
Master Gentian confirmed.
"Yes, he is the one."
Even though the master was renowned as the preeminent authority of his trade, unquestionable confirmation would be required. The High King's guards organized the swarm of healing mages into a single file line, while High King Panite and Low King Citrine withdrew from the birthing chamber with the child. Watercress's master gave him a sideways, knowing look. "When you are brought before the child, all you need do is tell the kings what you see," Master Annis said. "Our kings are fair and just. You have nothing to fear from them. Honesty is all they require." Watercress had not previously considered lying to the most powerful men in their kingdom, especially not to Low King Citrine, whom he had never met, but whom the people of Vetron respected immensely. So long as the 2 monarchs gave him no reason to deceive them, the apprentice had no intention of doing so. Besides, with so many other mages present, Watercress knew lying would only land him in trouble. Once it was Watercress's turn to enter the king's private room, he considered he should perhaps feel a degree of intimidation. However, he was nearly giddy. If he had any less sense about him, he would have grinned. Instead, he maintained a respectable composure. The High King clutched the newborn at arm's length around the baby's middle. Were the infant to defecate or retch, the mess would miss the king's bright crimson caftan, and potentially hit the apprentice's fresh cotton tunic instead. Watercress found the sight peculiar. It should have been humorous that such a domineering majesty would be associated with something so feeble as a newborn, but it disquieted him. Upon entering the small chamber, Watercress found himself hallucinating a familiar fruity taste, but he could not immediately place where he knew the flavor. Either I'm experiencing a peculiar case of dysphagia, or the High King adorned himself with overbearing foreign oils.
"What is this? A child will judge the fate of another child,"
the High King demanded, his voice filled with impatience rather than ire. Without taking offense, Watercress shrugged. "I'm older than a child, but I recognize the High King thinks me inexperienced. Compared to the other healing mages, I am. Even so, such an occurrence is not unheard of, but I won't delve into religious semantics with him." Where Watercress had failed in defending himself, Low King Citrine said, "Watercress is nearly a master. He has already returned from the Mage's College and contributed to the art of healing magic. Master Annis and I thought this opportunity would be an invaluable experience, despite his lack of a formal title. He's also written a diagnostic spell tome. It could be revolutionary for future generations of wizards. You may even know of his research. He worked in Master Yarrow's laboratory, discovering new methods of treating traumatic injuries." Watercress found his Low King's remarks flattering, though the statement didn't properly encompass the topics he had studied. If circumstances had been different, he would have loved to discuss his research further. The High King paid no attention to the Low King. He eyed the young apprentice with even greater scrutiny.
"What do you see?"
A mess of intangible silver strings hung limply from the newborn's back. Once Watercress gazed into the infant's black eyes, the strings became taut and shot out above the child's head to reveal an intricate veined pattern of small, useless wings. Little by little, the intangible wings elongated along the newborn's arms and legs and sprouted from the sides of his face, too. Soon the baby was laughing and smiling, and Watercress shared his jubilance. Moments later, the silver of the immaterial wings turned to a brilliant yellow. They flapped, but they had no more influence over the physical world than phantoms did. "I can see the baby's wings," Watercress said.
"For the record, you're claiming this to be the Arcspawn."
The High Vizier, the High King's most trusted advisor, scribbled notes on a sheet of parchment.
"He's certainly a spawn,"
Watercress agreed. There was no physical indicator to discern whether he was the Arcspawn or a regular one. It had been the Oracle Lemniscate who had foretold that the next Arcspawn would be born before the end of the rotation in the city of Sithica. Because spawn were born so infrequently, fewer than 1 in a million, and because an oracle's prophecy had never been wrong before, this child was almost certainly the Arcspawn. Moreover, if no more spawn were born for the next 100 rotations or so, they would know this child was the one. The Vizier took Watercress's answer for a yes, and the apprentice withdrew from the small room. Before the meeting, Watercress had been uncertain if he had wanted to make eye contact with the spawn. However, the infant had decided for him. Watercress had a good feeling about the child, but he had an ominous premonition about him in the hands of the High King, despite Master Annis's opinion. Regardless, there was nothing to be done about it. His master collected Watercress and strolled with him back to the luxurious shop they called home. They never discussed what they saw, for it was not the first time either of them had seen a spawn. In fact, of the 2 adult spawn residing in Vitron's capital of Sithica, Watercress was rather fond of them both. Behind the closed doors of their home, Watercress ventured to ask, "What will happen to the Arcspawn now? I'm assuming he will not stay with his family as the regular spawn do." "I believe it is the will of High King Panate to take the child with him back to Coserai to raise the Arcspawn under the spiritual guidance of the High Priest." "I wonder if he'll be happy there," Watercress mused. "I would think he will be," Master Annis said. Watercress doubted it. The image of the baby clutched in the High King's grip flooded back to him, and he anticipated the relationship between the two would not change as the boy aged. The concept again unsettled Watercress. While recollecting his experience during the birth, the wails of the newborn's mother echoed in Watercress's mind. "I wonder if he'll ever see his mother again." An overwhelming guilt built in his gut as Watercress suppressed a memory of his own mother. Any time his past threatened to surge into his conscious mind, he curtailed it. Instead, he climbed the smooth stone steps to his bedroom in the upper area of the shop and worried over the fate of their age's Arcspawn. It was later in the week. The High King had returned to the realm's capital kingdom Coserai with the Arcspawn, and the other healing mages had left Sithica. Master Annis had named Watercress a master healing mage in his own right, and on the evening following his graduation, a messenger came from a merchant's manor. "I was instructed to bring a healing mage," the messenger said with panic in his voice. Master Watercress glanced up from the letter he had been writing to his fiancée Poppy, and exchanged a glance with his master, who had a heavy text cradled in his lap. "Why don't you go?" his former teacher suggested. "It can be your first assignment alone, as a master." Master Annis had to correct himself. Watercress had often cared for patients alone, mostly when his former teacher was tending to another patient, or when he was in the middle of a particularly intriguing passage in his book. Watercress raised an eyebrow, but conceded. Despite sharing the same title, Master Annis still had many more rotations experience on him, and Watercress would respect his request. The messenger took a brisk pace as he wound through the stone city streets with Watercress. Along the way, he informed the newly minted master that the patient was a slave who was delivering a monstrously bloody birth. After she got blood on a fine rug, the owner of the house told the other slaves to take her outside to bleed in their courtyard. To be paid, the owner requires you to save both the mother and the child. He's been entertaining this new idea, you see, breeding his slaves in his free time. He thinks it'll be cheaper than buying them new. A peculiar hobby, if you ask me, but I'm just a courier. Who am I to question Morgagor? The man has more gem than most nobles. Watercress didn't respond, but the thought sickened him. When I had been an apprentice, I had been at the disposal of Master Annis, much like a slave. Yet he would never require something like that from me. How despicable! In the fading light, the pair arrived in the manor's gardens, and Watercress could tell by the whimpers that the slave was dying. Her dark curly hair matted to her face with sweat, and her skin adopted an ashen, sickly complexion due to blood loss. He would have to work quickly, but he had faced much more dire situations before. If he cast everything correctly, both the mother and child would live. Watercress whispered spells to seal the interior wounds while pulling the clean blood back into the body, leveraging both his internal stores of sorcery and the wizardry of tomes. He conjured and directed spinning pools of energy to the tissues that required mending, and he gave her some mellow root for the pain. After directing one such energy well toward the baby, he sensed that the boy was doing fine, so Watercress could focus on the mother. Her condition improved rapidly in response to Watercress's treatment. Her skin returned to its natural tawny brown color, and she became much more responsive. Although her life was no longer in danger, she panicked.
My child,
she cried,
is going to have a horrific life. Do not save them. The life of a slave is worse than death.
The slave's comments disturbed Watercress, and though he believed the woman, he was uncertain what to make of her request. His purpose had always been to treat patients and ensure their survival.
I know you can do it. Suffocate them, turn their brain off before they breathe. Anything.
Her fierce amber eyes bore into his, pleading desperately. With a crowd of the manor's slaves gathering to witness the ordeal, Watercress racked his brain for a solution. If he let the child die, the help would know he acquiesced to her request. What trouble would it cause me to concede to the whims of a slave? If the owner of the house was enraged enough, my reputation or position could be on the line. What if I could give your son a better life? Watercress offered impulsively. I'm a master now. I can take on an apprentice. I could choose your child. The baby's a boy. The enslaved woman wore a strained smile as she considered the news. A moment later, she shook her head. He probably won't be a sorcerer. It doesn't matter. Even if he isn't born with innate magic, he could still study to become a wizard. Spell tomes will fuel his magic, and the Archspawn has been born. We won't need healing mages to have the sorcerer's sight until the next age begins. Watercress tried to find any solution he could. If you honor your promise that my baby will have a better life, then let him live. Otherwise, let him die. He won't die, Watercress said firmly.
Then save him,
the slave demanded before recoiling in labor pain. Watercress shook his head to clear it. He couldn't believe the situation he had found himself in. He also couldn't believe he had offered to take on a newborn as his apprentice. Usually, children had a few rotations with their families before they were selected to be trained. Usually, they displayed a knack for learning and for magic, at least in the case of mages' apprentices. Usually, a master had a few rotations experience before selecting an apprentice. But Watercress knew there would be nothing usual about any of this. With the mother assuaged, the delivery proceeded smoothly. The child was born, screaming and kicking. Watercress looked at the infant that was to become his apprentice, and he didn't know how he would explain any of this to Master Annis, or even worse, to Poppy. Watercress wondered if his old teacher would be upset over his irrational decision or intrigued over his choice of student. Either way, Watercress did not believe Annis would be pleased to have another apprentice roaming around after he had just finished training Watercress. As for Poppy, she was another concern he would have to consider later. This incident might be a discouraging sign for their long-distance relationship. Perhaps I can request the mother finishes nursing the baby before I adopt him as my own. It would allow me a cushion of time to sort through some of the logistics. Before he could propose the offer, Watercress noticed something he had missed in the darkening twilight. Trailing down the infant's back were black metal thighs. that no one in the crowd but he could perceive. With a sinking feeling, the young master realized two truths simultaneously. One, the High King did not have the Archspawn in his custody, and two, for the good of the child, Watercress would do anything to keep it that way.